Hi! My God, I just really had to say hi. Aliyah says hi, and my dad says hi. Everyone says hi. Allie, I missed your face.
I miss you too, Kira.
Yeah, this is like the first time we've actually physically spoken in like a year, over a year.
A long time. Oh, look,
It's
more
been a
people are
while.
coming in too. Oh my gosh, this is so exciting.
What? Introduce species. Well, I'm gonna mute myself because I am outside and we're at the beach, so I'm here, I'm listening, I'm just muted.
Okay. Love you, Kira.
I love you too, Allie.
All right. Well, hello, everybody, and thank you for being here. I am Kalia from Science Division. Jay's going to be joining us in just a second. He's making sure that we're getting the stream to YouTube up and running. We just wanted to thank everybody for coming today and being a part of this. I am going to record the meeting so that we can share it with people later, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. If you do not want to be seen or captured in the recording, you can go ahead and turn your video off and then you will not show up. Oh, and here's Jay. He's the other half of Science Division.
Hi, everyone.
We're so excited to have Allie here. She's just this incredible force of positivity in the fandom. And so we're going to hand this over to Allie, and she's going to lead us in this incredible discussion about, navigating destructive negativity and keeping the fandom positive,
Oh, thank you. That was quite an introduction. I'm honored. Also, I'm sure I speak for many of us when I say thank you guys for having this Connected Con. Incredible. I know a lot of us are struggling with the fact that we can't go to an actual convention. We're missing that. It's kind of in the midst of convention season. So thank you so much for being willing to host all these fun panels and virtual tables and music and trivia and all that fun stuff. So if for anyone that's coming that doesn't already know, I am Allie, better known as the 24-year-old Trekkie. Yeah, it's a little weird. I know that I call myself by my age, and when I get a little bit older, I might not feel as good about doing that. We'll see. But I'm just going to give you a little bit of a lowdown of how this panel is going to work. It's going to be a lot more conversational than probably you're used to at most panels where someone's up on stage and you listen to them talk and there's a Q&A after. But it's more like Kalia and Jay and I are going to have a conversation about this. And what I think is important to also address is when regarding fandom negativity and gatekeeping, I am not the do-all say-all about this. I'm kind of bringing this to you guys from the experiences that I've had, but I know that a lot of people have had other experiences, and that's why I invite everyone at the end. We're going to do a Q&A to share those experiences, or if you have questions, please do share. Also, one thing that the three of us, Kaylee and Jay and I, had wanted to talk about is there's a lot of stuff happening in the world right now. It's Pride Month, which is great, but there's also a lot of stuff happening with Black Lives Matter, and that stuff also is very directed to fandom and online interactions. But we had kind of talked and agreed that, I, as someone who is not a part of those communities, I am an ally to those communities, but I cannot, I will never understand, and I'm okay with that. But I want to make sure that we just address that stuff is important. And there are so many different content creators and people out there that you should be listening to those voices about it, because I'm not, I guess, qualified to talk about that sort of thing. So we kind of just wanted to cover that quick before we jumped in. But we're going to do like a conversational panel, and we'll have a Q&A at the end. But why don't we jump in? Really glad that everyone's here, and hopefully I don't sound like a crazy person. So we'll go from there. But I'll first tell you guys a little bit about where I come from with Star Trek, and that's that my parents got me into Star Trek when I was really young. Super formative an experience in my life. From when I was very little, watching reruns with my dad asleep on the couch, to now kind of really being involved in the Star Trek fandom. It's something that's kind of shaped my growing up. And that's why I am so passionate about these fandom issues like negativity. So we're going to start with a few main topics. And one thing I also want to kind of highlight is that some of these topics, there are bad things about them and there are good things about them. So you can kind of take it in both ways, but I'll start with kind of the negative aspect of it and end on the upswing with the positive aspect of it, because I don't want to sound like a Debbie Downer during this whole conversation. There are many aspects of fandom that are incredible, and that's why we're all here, right? That's why we're doing this today. So I'm going to start with my first topic, which is about that fandom in general. I'm going to come from a Star Trek point of view on this, is generational. And so, like I said, I grew up watching it with my parents. So they had experienced it. And then also, like, my grandparents had experienced it. And there are some people who have been watching Star Trek since it began. And there are other people that started yesterday watching Star Trek. And so I think that that generational thing can sometimes cause rifts within fandom, because there are certain people that say, you know, I have been a lifelong Trekkie. I was there at the beginning, and that makes me more qualified than someone who started yesterday. And that's really hard to hear, because as a Star Trek fan, we want to be accepting of everyone. That's what Star Trek's about, embracing diversity and welcoming new people and just cheering each other on. And that's what's so hard about this whole, like, okay, well, you can't be as much of a Trekkie as I am because I've watched it longer. I think one really big thing that happened to me is when I went to see the Deep Space Nine documentary in the theater, which is really cool. I was finally excited that I could see something Star Trek related in the theater, as someone who, you know, I got the Kelvin movies, but I didn't get stuff before that. I came out of the theater I was wearing my Deep Space Nine get up. I had my nose ridges on, I had my earring, and some guy approached me after the documentary and said, "Oh, that's cool. Like, you love, but I just want to let you know that you can never be as much of a fan as I am. You're too young. You can't appreciate Star Trek in the way that I can appreciate it because I have had it longer than you." And I didn't really know what to do. That's a very strange thing to be approached with. How do you respond to that in a way that I wanted to remain positive and show that I'm a part of the fandom, and I didn't want to fight back hate with hate. But I just kind of said, I think that as a Star Trek fan, we can all enjoy it. There doesn't have to be, a hierarchy to it. We can all enjoy it evenly because we like Star Trek. Why should we devise us more? Why should we try to split us up? So I guess my question to Kayla and Jay is that, have you guys interacted with, or have you ever seen anything like this happening in which generational Trekkies try to fight back against perhaps newer Trekkies, or vice versa? Or how do you feel about that?
I mean, I've seen a lot of it very from a distance, kind of on the internet. You know, as we kind of joined the Trek community at large really last year at Star Trek Las Vegas when we first kind of debuted our tribbles. And so our experience with all of that is still relatively small. But I definitely have seen a lot of people that we consider friends that we've made in the community that have been dealing with that. I have been really fortunate to have had some really great conversations with people who are of an older generation, and we can connect because I was raised on TOS. So even though I don't have the experience of like watching it on TV like they did, I can relate to that, like Captain Kirk and Spock and McCoy, like being my childhood heroes. So while like I've seen it be a problem for others, I have been very fortunate to have had some really great conversations where we actually kind of like bridged the generational gap because we had very similar childhood memories of our first experience with Star Trek. But I do know it's a problem for a lot of people.
Yeah. I feel like one thing that's important to mention too in regards to generational Star Trek is that obviously Star Trek has changed a lot since it's begun. We're looking today at a very different type of Star Trek than we had at TOS, and I'm not saying that's a good thing or a bad thing. That's up to you to decide, or up to you guys to decide. But the evolution of television is important to mention, because we're not looking at something like 60s TV anymore. Stories have changed. The pattern of storytelling has evolved over time. So I don't know that certain stories that worked back in TOS would work now, or same with vice versa. Stories that work now would work back then. And that's why I think some people choose, they say, you know, that what objectively is Star Trek? And that is such a hard thing to encompass, because I like to think Star Trek is something different to everyone. We all have an interpretation of Star Trek in which is uniquely ours, because we watched it at a certain point in our lives and we watched it with a certain person, and we all come from different demographics and live in different places, and to objectively try to encompass that as one thing is impossible. It is something to everyone. But on the bright side of this whole thing, Star Trek actually does connect generations as well. While some people do get a little bit divisive about, hey, this is where I came in to the franchise about Star Trek, it also allows the opportunity to connect with people who have been there from the beginning. I did a talk recently out in town in Okinawa about 2 months ago, and I did a little Star Trek presentation, and I had some guy come up to me and said, I have been consistently watching Star Trek episode by episode, rewatching consistently since the very beginning. And I am so glad that you are a part of this. I'm so glad that new people are getting into Star Trek. I know you're only 24, but now like that's new blood into the franchise, new ideas, new perspectives. And that's really what it should all be about, right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And we're seeing some people kind of talking in the chat about how, like, while it's a generational issue, it's also a lot about which treks you like, and that there's a lot of, I think the word that kind of got put into the title is gatekeeping, either regarding how much you know or which things you like and which shows you don't.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's important to mention, because I say this often, but I believe, or I'm not going to objectively say everyone should believe this, because I don't have a right to do that, but I believe that there should never be a hierarchy to Star Trek. There should not have to be like, if you've seen one episode of Star Trek and you call yourself a fan, that's great. You are a fan. There's no rule book as to what should make you that. Or if you've seen the whole, if you're a completist, you're also a fan. Good for you. That's awesome. And yes, certain people have preferences. I have preferences. I mean, I talk about it often, but also I think that you should be able to be happy that someone else enjoys it too. So say, I'm trying to think of a really good example of this. I didn't like Voyager very much until just recently, rewatching it. And it was mostly just because I watched it the first time through when I was younger, and I couldn't really grab those concepts quite yet. And then I saw other people online talking so much about Voyager. John Krikorian from Trek Profiles was doing a tweet through of watching back through Voyager, and I said, hey, I don't really think, I'm not a huge fan of Voyager, but he has this really interesting perspective about it. I'm really liking these like episode reviews. And so I went back and I rewatched it, and I got something out of it then that was different than I had gotten last time. And so it doesn't mean you objectively have to like or dislike a certain part of it. I just think that, if someone's going to enjoy it, let people like what they like. It's okay to have constructive debate about it. I encourage that 24/7. I would love to hear different perspectives. I want to know why you don't like it, but I don't want you to sit there and tell me I'm stupid because I like it. That's a totally different story. I'm going to get a little bit into that a little bit later. We'll go a little bit more in depth, but I think that along with the generational part of it, it leans into us as fans feeling ownership over Star Trek. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. We are so passionate about this thing, or not just Star Trek, but fandom. I know I'm leaning towards Star Trek a lot, but you guys probably all know that's my thing. So that's what I'll be referencing. But so many people feel ownership over a portion of fandom because you feel like you're part of it. You should feel like you're part of it. You want to be involved. You want to have a say. And honestly, fans are what saves Star Trek. The write-in campaign for TOS. That's what saves Star Trek. We as fans save Star Trek. So yeah, of course we have a feeling of ownership over it. But it's hard to say, but like Star Trek doesn't have to be what one person says it is. just because someone believes Star Trek is this, that's great. That's their opinion about what they believe it is. But like I said earlier, we all have different perspectives of what Star Trek is to us. So we shouldn't try to conform that onto anyone else. That seems a little ridiculous. Star Trek means something very different to everyone. I mean, even you, Jay and Kayla, like, do you, between the both of you, of course, you're together and you've experienced Star Trek together, but do you guys think that both of you have a very different idea of what Star Trek is to you guys, like individually?
I mean, I think we have just such a different point of origin from Star Trek that like watching TOS for me, having grown up on it, is never going to be the same as watching TOS for Jay, having his girlfriend at the time drag him into it and go, no, this is awesome, sit there and watch it, you know? And then the rest of the Trek universe we experienced together. But I think my own reaction to Star Trek changes every time I watch through a series too, as I grow and evolve, and my opinions about it grow and evolve, and actually having conversations with other people about it changes my opinion about it too. So I think that it's really important to have those conversations because it allows us to get something more out of Trek than we maybe would have originally gotten out of it, or hearing the perspective of someone who has a different background, someone who, you know, is completely different and can say, well, when this is what I saw. And for me to be like, oh my gosh, that was not at all my experience of it. But then to see it through their eyes, I think is really helpful and helps me understand humanity better, because Star Trek talks about humanity and deals with humanity, but I can only see it through my lens of humanity. And so seeing it through somebody else's lens shows me that there's so much more there, or that Trek still has a lot of work in terms of being someone's Trek, you know?
Yeah.
One of the, I was just part of the Sci-Fi Sisters has a salon. They had a conversation yesterday. And hearing there be conversation about how, you know, it was awesome to see Uhura, but then there wasn't a Black woman in Trek for another 50 years or so. And, you know, knowing that people key into stuff like that and that that's part of that experience, kind of blew my mind. And I was like, wow, I have so much to learn through conversations with other people. So I think that's really important.
I think it's also important to remember that this is, right now we're at a Star Trek themed convention and that kind of stuff, but it's a human problem, and it happens all over. And I think a lot of it stems from you know, the idea that people are binary, but the fact is they're not. You know, everyone has their own unique perspective on the world, and you know, to think that if you like this, then you must also like this is part of the problem. And just being able to see people for humans, and you know, and to be human is to be unique and different, and you know, not have one thing define you. I think it's important to keep that in mind. We live in a very divisive world right now, and it's important to remember that the people on the other side of the keyboard or the table or the phone or whatever are also people. And even if you don't have the same views, you know, though it's important to hear how they feel anyway, because it helps you widen your view. And that's the tricky part, is how do you then, okay, with that knowledge, how do you actually then make headway when you are having some of those negative interactions online? And I think that's where it's really tricky. You know, we're all, you know, we're here because we're thinking about it, but like, how do we make it better?
And I actually misspoke. It was another Black woman of color on the bridge that it took 50 years to get to, or another Black woman on the bridge. So see, like, there I am opening my mouth in places I shouldn't.
It's okay. I think a lot of us knew what you meant. Yeah. Yeah. I think Jay gives a really good segue into what I wanted to talk about, how people embrace the anonymity of being online. It's both a good thing and a bad thing. So it's exciting to be able to have your own space online, your own community, right? To talk with like-minded people, or maybe people that don't think the same as you, but you all have joined together to talk about this thing, this entity that you love, whether it's a show or an activity or whatever. And it's cool to be in that space, and it's cool to kind of, you are in charge, you are in control of what you put out. but that also means that you are in control of what you put out. So it's important to like Jay said, realize that it's not, I mean, if you're going to put something out that might offend someone, you might want to think about that, or you might want to think about the words that you're saying, because they can affect people in different ways than you might understand. So for example, I had an experience that happened to me really recently that I think back to, and I am really kind of ashamed that I didn't think it through quite so much before. And so there's this trend on Twitter in which you post my plans, and then you post a picture, and then it's 2020, and then you post another picture, kind of talking about like how crazy this year is. And I had posted a picture of, I'm really going to try hard not to spoil this for anyone, but I had posted a picture of Hugh from Picard. And then the second picture I had posted was also something that happened to Hugh in Picard that a lot of you probably know what it is, but I'm not going to say it so as not to spoil it. Yeah, but it was not good. And I had not realized that posting something about that happening could have, sparked some memories from someone who's struggling, or might have just lost someone from COVID-19. And I didn't think about that. I just thought, oh, well, this is clever. Maybe I'll post it. And someone reached out to me and had said, I, uh, I don't know that I thought it was funny. And I immediately, I didn't even think about it, because it's hard, because you can't always predict what everyone is thinking. But then also it's important to say, well, okay, I might not have made the right choice there, and I'm consistently learning. And I've been doing this social media thing now for about 5-6 years and have been pretty active, and I'm still learning every single day. It's something that evolves and changes, and I'm not perfect, and it, I don't know that any of us are, but we're trying. We're trying to talk about Star Trek and other fandom related things, and that's why it's hard to navigate tone online. You don't know when someone types out something, if it's like, oh, maybe I was sarcastic about it, but it might have seemed not sarcastic. As someone, as like, I can't tell sarcasm in real life goes over my head. How am I supposed to recognize that online? I just think that so many people will go behind that mask of, okay, well, I don't have to be, or don't have to feel like a real person here, or don't have to be polite or respectful, so I can attack others and it's fine. And it's not. We're all real people. Look at us all. We're here right now. 46 of us here, real people that are not just, we're not bots. We have feelings, and words matter. But, that's it's the duality of being a part of like a community like this. And so, yes, there are incredible things that happen, but there's also people that will always seek out to try to destroy that. Uh, I mean, there's always going to be people that are just going to try to hurt you because they want to. They think it's fun. Their mission in life is to tear other people down. And I am sorry that those kind of people exist, but they do. I had some random journalist once. I posted a thing about me in my Star Trek uniform, and he retweeted and tagged me in it and said, wow, you're mocking the military right now because you're wearing this uniform. And I was like, wait a minute. Like, first of all, I had clearly denoted, like, hey, look at my Star Trek uniform. It's so cool. I love it. Like, that's essentially what my caption had said. And he was like, wow, you're very disrespectful to the military. And it was hard. But, as someone, my husband's in the military. We come from a Gold Star family. It's, people don't think about that sort of thing. They just try to pull you out of it to make you angry. And it's part of the technology age. I was experiencing this sort of stuff when I was in high school too. I was cyberbullied all throughout high school. And I don't want to say that made me better prepared for it now, because it hurts no matter what. Each time you'd like to think it gets easier. It really doesn't. But it's not something that is respectful in any way to anyone that thinks that, hey, I'm going to have a discourse with a person right now and rip them apart. Why would anyone ever, would anyone do that in real life? I mean, I suppose someone might. But I can't imagine some of the interactions that I've had online of someone actually coming out face to face to me in real life and saying that sort of thing to me. And it's because they don't have to, why they think it's okay. But I know I've already been talking way too much. And now I'm going to move into a little bit more. I have way more prepared, which maybe we'll have to do another time. But I'm going to move a little bit into ways that I myself have kind of overcome this sort of thing, because I could talk all day about the stuff that's happened, but I'm going to try to think, I always try to think practically about how I can better represent myself as a Star Trek fan within this community to people who may not be as kind or positive or wanting to connect with others. And so when I receive stuff like this, I always have to take a step back and wait for like, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes or however long I can wait to think objectively. Because sometimes when I get messages, they're like, I'm angry. And I'd like to think that I'm not. I'd like to think that I could not be angry about it, but I am. Or I'm sad, or I'm upset, or I'm hurt. And so I take a step back and I say, okay, I need to wait until I can think logically about this. I'm going to pull a little Spock move. I'm going to wait to think logically. And so I wait a little bit, and the best way that I can describe this is that I don't know that it's always a good idea to return hate with hate. I think that can sometimes happen often, in which people say, you know, someone just ripped me up, and so I'm going to do that to them. Like I said, I'm not trying to tell any of you guys how you should interact online. That is up to you completely. But I think that if, in my opinion, if you return something just as bad with what they gave you, does that make you any better than that person? I don't know. Does it? I don't know. But I always try to respond in a way where I say, okay, I understand you're angry. I understand you're upset. And you have every right to feel that way. I'm not in charge of your opinion, but this is how we're going to leave it, in which, okay, we disagree. And that's the way it's going to be. And if you're really angry at me, if you really don't like me, then don't follow me, you know, or don't interact with me. But then there are those people who are persistent. Okay, I'm going to keep poking at you. I'm going to keep poking at you. And there are people like that. And if it helps you to mute or block, or, you know, whatever it takes to make you feel comfortable, for me, I try my best to stick it out as long as possible. But there are those people that I've felt the need to, you know, they are toxic to me. I cannot have this in my profile because I'm trying to stay positive online, and it's impossible with someone who's acting like that. And that's fine. And it's okay. I've been blocked by a lot of people too. And I understand maybe I'm just not the message they need to be hearing right now. And that's something that sometimes can be hard for me to accept, but I just have to, right? I think that with my tagline, if any of you guys know the Trekkie tagline, which is make your fandom your own, it's all about being yourself online, or like within your fandom. And it's okay. Like, some people will not accept that. Some people will. There's always going to be people that don't like you in real life or online. But I think that it's important to don't let that break down your creativity or inspiration or whatever you're passionate about. Don't let that dull it. Let it, I mean, if anything, sometimes I let it fuel mine, where, all right, they don't like what I do, but I'm going to keep doing it anyway. But it's important to always stay respectful and civil. And when people disagree with you, that's okay. There is a reverse gatekeeping. I do want to make sure to sneak that in before I run out of time. There's reverse gatekeeping, in which someone, okay, we hear a lot of new Trek versus old Trek. That's a common theme within fandom. And there are people that say, you know, like I had mentioned earlier, you can't like Trek because I like old Trek. You can never appreciate it that way. But there's also people that, if anyone will express a negative view about Star Trek, they immediately go in and attack them for it. And that's not right either. You're okay. You're allowed to not like parts of Star Trek. It's not against the rules. You're allowed to even express that, as long as you're not harassing people, harassing actors, producers, being rude or like completely out of line with other people. You can express that without being that way. And so I think it's important that we all just listen to each other a little bit more, and be willing to ask questions and really figure out where people are coming from with this sort of thing. Because just because someone doesn't like it doesn't mean they're attacking you. It just means they might think differently than you.
So
yeah.
Allie, you had
we're at 7:45. Yeah.
have you had instances where you maybe had somebody respond to you in a way that didn't feel positive, but you've been able to have conversations with them about it and had something positive come out of it?
Yes. One thing that I think is really important is there are some people within fandom that have consistently, whether they've just jumped into it or for a while, that they have received hate for some reason from someone on any side of the fandom, and then they then have a negative view on it, or they think, okay, well, I receive negative stuff all day, maybe that's what I'm supposed to do, maybe I'm supposed to be negative, or maybe this is what it's supposed to be. And I've had that before where I've mentioned, hey, it's okay you don't like that, I'm not attacking you for it, it's totally okay. And they say, I've never had anyone online tell me that it's okay for me to think this way, that they have like been suppressed purposefully. And then they say, well, I didn't know that it was okay, like that I didn't have to be so argumentative about it, that I didn't have to be so protective of myself. And so there are people that if you sit down and it's okay you don't like that, we disagree, it's fine, I like it though, so it's just the way it is. And they say, oh, okay, I understand now, that we'll just agree to disagree. So it does happen, it's not impossible. It really isn't. I think that sometimes we think that if someone's, I don't want to say I'll check people, but sometimes people will post things that are questionable, or like maybe it may seem that they're attacking someone. And I'll say, hey, stop a minute. Do you want to think about maybe what the other person was saying? Like, do you want to think about their perspective? Maybe like just because you don't agree doesn't mean it's not important, or that their voice shouldn't be heard. And they said, oh, I didn't realize that I was doing that. I'm really sorry. And I mean, those, I'd like to say those are, I'd want them to be the most interactions that I have of people realizing, maybe I shouldn't be spreading that sort of thing. I would, I'm unfortunately saying that I get more angry stuff than good stuff, but there are still good stuff. It's not impossible. But yeah, we are moving a little bit into our Q&A portion, I believe. I have way more that we can all talk about later, but I would love if any of you guys have questions, or if you have comments or ideas, if how you yourself personally have kind of navigated through this social media world. Kalia and Jay are going to do a hand raising thing that I think they'll explain to you in a sec.
Yeah, one of the functions of the Zoom, if you open the participants window, you should be able to find your name, and there should be a function that you can click on that allows you to raise your virtual hand. And we'll be kind of going through the list and helping get those questions pointed to Allie. So Molly has a question. So I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Hey, so you mentioned it's Pride, and I would like to speak kind of as a member of the queer community, and also
Yes.
About a tweet that I posted the other day that a lot of people saw, where I said that if you don't support Black Lives Matter, you are not a Star Trek fan. And I think that that's a kind of gatekeeping that we need to act doing. I think that in my experience, I have met people who don't like Discovery or don't like Deep Space Nine, and somehow curiously don't like any of the Star Treks that have Black leads. And there are a lot of people who don't like Discovery because it's not straight white dudes fighting aliens. And I think that is popping up so much in our community right now with everything that's going on, with it being during Pride. And I just kind of wanted to ask what you think about that, in the context of gatekeeping, in the context of Trek philosophy, and what it means to be a Star Trek fan. Because I know for me, like, I want to believe that anyone can be, but I feel like you can't if you don't espouse the philosophy of it.
Yeah, that's a really good question, Molly. And the way that I think about that is actually something that, if any of you guys know Batleth Babe, Heather, she has this on her, I think she might have recently changed it, but she always talks about living a Star Trek inspired life. And that's kind of where I come with it, as well as Star Trek has inspired me throughout my life. And it is hard when you come in contact with those people that seem to be a direct opposite of Star Trek ideology, right? Of those people that are like, I'm such a Star Trek fan, and yet are, bigoted or racist or, transphobic or all this stuff. That's like, how on earth could someone that is a Star Trek fan believe that? And it's hard because it does have to do with our, like, the whole demographic of Star Trek is a very wide franchise in which there are many different people that are a part of it and enjoy it. But I think that for me, my opinion, I can't say that I'm qualified to make a overall judgment, but I think true Star Trek fans are those that abide by that Star Trek ideology. For me, those are the people that I want to be interacting with. Those are the people that really fuel this Star Trek love that we all have, right? And the people that seek to tear that down may call themselves Star Trek fans. They may enjoy the show, but they didn't get the message. I don't know that they retain the message of what Star Trek is about, because I posted something recently about Black Lives Matter and about, people were saying, well, your feed isn't so much Star Trek anymore. And I don't know if I like that, because I was posting stuff about Black Lives Matter. And I said, you know what? This Star Trek is a Black Lives Matter. Like, Black Lives Matter is a humanity issue. And Star Trek is a reflection of humanity. So how can you, now, you can't choose to bail now because it's inconvenient for you. You have to choose now to fight for it even more than you did before. So does that answer your question, Molly?
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to hear your perspective on the whole thing. So.
Yeah. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, thank you.
I think we also, like, as fans of Star Trek, have a responsibility to try to help educate people too, right? So if there is an opportunity to have a conversation come out of it, instead of just saying, well, you're not a Trek fan, so it's over between, if there is an opportunity to have a conversation to help that person realize what is about, that's part of what it's trying to do too. Trek wasn't just trying to say, hey, you're wrong. It was trying to say, look how you can do better. And obviously that's not always something that we can do, but if we do have that opportunity, then Trek helps give us some of the tools to say, but did you watch this episode? And what did you think of it? And hopefully start to have some of those conversations that are hard conversations. And they're hard conversations because they're important, right? So if there's room for that, I think that's important too.
Yeah, no, absolutely right.
You have a few other questions. I think Larry was next. So I'm gonna go ahead and ask you to unmute.
Hey, this is awesome. Allie, you're doing a great job. I just wanted to say,
you, Larry.
Here's a history bit. I put this in the chat, and at least one person reacted to it. We're talking about gatekeeping, and just kind of 2 weeks ago on Life Support Live that Dr. Ali and I started doing on Saturdays. I invite everybody to come over and watch on Saturdays. But gatekeeping was our subject, and it didn't dawn on me till then to put it in these. So much stuff goes by, and it's like you think of it on the face value, and then years go by and you can connect some dots, right? And it dawned on me that as much as we're talking about gatekeeping in Trek fandom, and I still like to think, maybe I'm an optimist, I still like to think that antagonistic is maybe 10% of fandom, and social media has just amplified it. And we've got so many people coming out with wherever they're coming from, socially, whatever the thing is, instead of everybody just kind of being quietly part of a mass. I still like to think it's only 10% that are really antagonistic and it gets amplified, or whether it's bought and trolled. But aside from all that, as we talk about that, it struck me that we have Star Trek organized fandom, and especially conventions, because back when Trek exploded in 66 and 67, it was first on TV, science fiction fandom had been around, organized with cons and the World Cons and all that since the late 30s, the first generation fan. Okay. It's just that TV movies, right, had always been joke, and you had occasionally Day the Earth Stood Still, or anyway, but most of the time, if it was TV and film, it was schlocky, bam, bug-eyed monster, right? And the serious sci-fi was the books, and so that's where most of sci-fi fandom revolved around. And then Twilight Zone was great, but it was an anthology. Well, here comes Star Trek, and it explodes, and as we all know, it was a whole new paradigm and pioneered everything. Okay, but at the moment, when those Star Trek fans, whether they were going already or whether they looked around and found conventions and went in, all of a sudden the old school LitCon sci-fi fandom, which was what sci-fi fandom was now, it's like nobody talked about corded phones until there were cordless phones. It was just a phone, right? So like all of a sudden the LitCon fans went, oh, and it was cool but then there was this snobbery, there was this gatekeeping about, okay, you guys can get excited about this show, but you're not a real sci-fi fan until you've read, have you read Heinlein? Have you read Asimov? Have you read? And they would go through this whole like classic lit snobbery because they were people that were hopping up here. I've been in fandom for, and now to put our terms of the day, that was happening. And after 2 and 3 and 4 years of that, finally some of them were going, look, why don't you guys just go off and do your own convention? And they did. And we all know what happened after that. So it's kind of funny thinking back then. And for years and years and years, there was this head banging. Like we were trying to, back when I was in Oklahoma, we were trying to have, I had friends who were in the convention of the time that I was helping build. I would talk about having Star Trek actors. And after I had a pipeline to get people in, they're like, oh, and they were all concerned about having this purity literary thing, and they wouldn't dare have actors on their thing because that would make it, it was a media thing and that would dilute it down. And we started our own convention, even with people I knew, to do that. And then of course, within a year or two, they were still having 500 people. We're getting 1,500 people. Right. And it's not good or bad. It's just, you got TV's mass media. I'm not judging. It's just what's happening. So it's funny how the gatekeeping then has led, so now we've come full circle where Star Trek started all this. And now we've got the Comic-Cons and DC, Marvel, and Star Wars and Harry Potter for now, maybe not for long. But you've got all the big fandoms, and Star Trek didn't have a chair at the table. And now it's going from a little kid's table to the big kids table finally again. And Star Trek started all of this. And it's just looking at all those things in perspective. Because gatekeeping has always been around. It's maybe not the way we're thinking about it right now, but sometimes it's hurtful, obviously, but sometimes you can take it and go, okay. And, and not hate on hate, but you can take it and do something with it, and you never know. But I love that. You go back and why don't you guys just leave us alone and go start your own thing? And they wind up becoming 10 times bigger.
I don't want to cut you off, Larry, but we are almost at time, and I want to try to get one more question in. The next, hand was Fathery, Text Trek.
Nice.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Hi. I just wanted to ask, as someone else who, grew up a big fan of the original series, and all those characters are very near and dear to my heart, and something that I've noticed is a lot of people that are younger or newer to the fandom sometimes have a harder time with the original series specifically, because some of it hasn't aged as well, just like all media from that time. And while being very progressive and inclusive for the time, sometimes modern audiences or younger audiences might have a harder time going back and enjoying that material. So I just wanted to ask if that's something that you've come across, or what's kind of the best way to recommend people don't just disregard that stuff, to still go and look at it, while also acknowledging that they might be concerned about some of those issues.
I think as someone who, TOS was not my first, but I definitely was watching it while growing up. I think that it can be hard, especially with the evolution of television that we talked about, and with a lot of my friends that I'm trying to introduce to Star Trek, I don't know that TOS would be something that they would be fascinated with. And I think that it really depends on the person. I have a few friends that that's their sort of thing, like that slow burn TOS, it's not so much about the space battles and a little bit more about, let's think about how this is a reflection of humanity, rather than, something like the Kelvin timeline, which is action packed, which is Trek in its own right, just a different type of Trek. The best way to recommend, or to promote moving towards TOS, is that it's really is the blueprint for the rest of Star Trek, and that If they enjoy, say they watched a tidbit of something else, or even if they watched the Kelvin timeline films and they thought, hey, this is an interesting concept, they can go back and then watch any of the other iterations, and that is going to give a lot more background than that like flash bang that we got within the Kelvin timeline. Yeah, does that kind of answer your question, or are you looking more towards like how do we appeal TOS more towards
Just-
like my sort of generation?
Just, you know, some of the things I've had as people kind of consider it a relic of its time, with some of the you know, sexism that would have been
Yeah.
kind of unintentionally in there, even though the show, you know, tried to be much more progressive than, you know, other things at the time, and stuff like that. Sometimes I have a hard time asking modern audiences to tolerate that while they're going back and watching something that is older.
Yeah, it definitely does. It can sometimes feel dated, and you can watch it and it feels very cringy. But I think it goes to show that we had a long way to go back when TOS premiered, and we also still have a long way to go now. And that yes, it is a reflection of its time that we don't like to think back to nowadays, but more of a reflection of the message of Star Trek as like we can always be better, and humanity is always constantly trying to improve itself. And so, yeah. Sorry, I know that was really roundabout. But I understand exactly what you're saying, that it can feel a little bit different, especially for someone like me who grew up more with like action-packed television, and then going back to TOS is definitely a whole different ballgame. But
Well, I wonder if we can take the opportunity to look at,
yeah, no, please go ahead.
sorry. I was just going to say, I
also,
wonder if we can take the opportunity to look. I think our internet might be.
Or it might be a little.
Yeah.
It's okay. Yeah, I think it's just kind of like a retrospective Star Trek fans, and that's why it's always important to have the conversations about what Trek is your first Trek, or why did you start watching, or what's your favorite episode or your favorite character. And that's why it's always kind of important to go back to those questions, to reflect on where we came in within the Star Trek universe and how that's important and how that's affected our watching and our love of it. That's what's so exciting also about getting to interact with all of you guys. But I know we're running short on time, and we have an amazing musical performance that's coming up from Keith, and I would love for all of you guys to watch, and I'm excited to watch too. So I know that Kaylee and Jay, the link is posted and everything. We're all excited. I'm excited for that. So I will kind of segue off. Like I said, I know that probably maybe a few of you else wanted to ask questions. Please get in contact with me. On Twitter, I'm at Trekkie. Same with Instagram, Facebook, all that stuff. Ask me a question or reach out, DM. I'm okay with all that stuff if you have any more questions, or just kind of wondering about fandom and my experience in general. Like I said, I'm not the fandom goddess that knows everything. I'm not. But I'm just kind of telling you guys what I've experienced. So, but yeah.
And thank you, Allie, so much for doing this. This was Allie's idea. She reached out to us to say, hey, I think this is a conversation that we really need to have. So I just want to recognize that you were a big part of kind of expanding what this Connected Community Con was and what it could be. So thank you for doing that. And now, if everyone is interested, Keith's concert really is going to be incredible. It's all original music based on sci-fi, fantasy kind of stuff. And you can find the link to that Twitch live stream back on the Connected Con homepage. But absolutely, if you have questions, do hit Allie up. It's a great way, direct messages or, Twitter or whatever. She's a great person to talk to about this stuff and point you in the right direction, and talk to each other about it too. These are important conversations to keep having. Yes. So we want to thank you guys all for coming, and hopefully we'll see some of you guys in the chat room at Keith's concert. And then again, Larry is hosting the after party, which is going to be a trivia night, and that is going to be at 8:00, starting at 8:00 Eastern time. That link is also on our website, and it should be a really good time. So hopefully we'll see some of you guys there as well. So thanks, everybody.
Thank
Long
you.
and prosper.